Welcome. I'm Dick Miller, and my good friend Senator Jeff Smith is here, and we get together, as you all know, about monthly and talk over the happenings in the Wisconsin Senate, or unhappenings and non-happenings. So welcome to you, and welcome to our audience today. Before we get started, though, I just, as an announcement, and many people locally may have seen it in the local paper, the Trempealeau County did approve building of a justice center adjacent to the courthouse here in Whitehall, and there's going to be a groundbreaking January 17th at 5 p.m. as long as
May 17th.
Did I say? What did I say?
You said January.
It's too warm to be January.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. In May of this year, the 17th at 5 p.m., unless it rains or snows, and evidently it's going to be held inside. So anyway, we certainly invite you there, and we invite the residents here in the county. This is a very large project. For a county this size, and Jeff, as some of you know, lives in the Eau Claire area, and they have had major projects in the last several years in terms of Justice Center and facilities. So welcome. Hopefully everybody who's interested can attend. So that's my first and only announcement today.
All right.
Touch this subject just briefly, as some of you may know who have listened to the national media. Florida has passed some restrictive voting laws, and they were just signed into as a law, and signed into law, I think yesterday maybe?
Maybe been a couple of days ago, but when you watch this, it may have been a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago. But yeah, it was the first week of May. They signed it.
Yeah. And what is so interesting is that CNN evidently, CNN, Fox was the only network allowed to be there. No other media could be there at the signing of these bills. And I just find that amazing.
Wow.
This is such a significant public event.
Wow.
To not allow the
that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
What happened to our freedom of press in this country, which is so important to our democracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what some of the other networks are saying too.
They're deciding who can cover it.
Yeah.
Oh, we could talk about that the whole half hour here. That is incredible.
I wanted to point that out because we don't know at this point, or do you know anything going on with the Wisconsin legislature?
Well, it so happens. Yeah, I'm ranking member on elections committee in the Senate, and so this is happening. Every week we're having hearings on bills similar to what Florida has passed and Georgia has passed. We haven't seen the one where they're going to restrict getting water in the line, but Florida actually included that in their bill, as well as Georgia, which tells you all you need to know, right? But some of the things that are similar to what we're hearing in the bills that we've heard so far are restrictions on drop-off boxes and a number of other things. Let me try to think about this, but because we just had a hearing 2 days ago as well, and I think we got another one coming up next week, because there's been a number of bills, and they're kind of like 5 or 6 per week that we have a hearing on. And then we will be, I'm sure, having them come to the floor, and then it'll be up to the governor. But there's just so much concern for what's happening here. And in fact, one, Matt Rothschild from Wisconsin Democracy Campaign testified this week, and not only talked about the bills, but just really lectured the committee about this path we're going down. All based on what we know are lies about how the past election was rigged or or it was unfair. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that is a slap in the face to every clerk and every poll worker in this country and in this county and in this district and in this state. I mean, they do everything by the book, and they follow every possible thing by the letter. And though we were in a situation last year with COVID where they gave more opportunities to try to drop off your ballots outside. This is what happened in Dane County, right? So they set up it was actually the clerk's office, all certified, professional people out of the clerk's office.
There'd be deputies probably.
I mean, this is genuine. Not just anybody was collecting ballots. They were set up outdoors so people felt safe on a weekend to drop off their ballots. So they wouldn't have to go through standing in line and going into indoors with strangers during the pandemic. I mean, it seemed not only perfectly legitimate, but something we should think about all the time, giving people more opportunity to actually participate in our democracy and not fear for their health or their chance to vote when otherwise they may not have such opportunity if they're working during the week, or that's a whole nother issue. But yeah, there's all sorts of bills coming through us too that are restricting those possibilities.
Well, and I think Wisconsin has such a clean record of voting, probably as clean as any state. And having worked with the county clerk here, I would certainly support your idea that these clerks work very hard. They're concerned that they don't want to be embarrassed by mistakes. They don't, they're elected officials.
Yeah.
And if they screw up, it's not going to be good for them. So they work hard. So anyway, I keep us informed as we go along if there's anything coming out that looks like it. I guess one thing, if a bill comes out that doesn't seem to meet the smell test in terms of need, the governor would take a look at that.
So the governor is almost certainly going to be vetoing all these bills. So we're really wasting our time and efforts right now
to make it harder to vote.
Yeah, it's all political, and I'm sorry, I'm just always going to be very blunt about this stuff. It's just all politics, trying to feed again and build on this big lie, which is why Matt Rothschild was so upset and lecturing the committee that this is wrong. Continue this lie and build on it and get people to distrust our democracy. This is the country that has thrived on the democratic process. And if we're going to destroy it this way, what do we have left? Because it's all built on trust and on those individual polling places with, we all are familiar with, that we go to in our own neighborhood or our own town. We know everybody there, and we can trust them.
Yeah. It's interesting, especially in Trempealeau County. If you go into your local voting place, you have to show your ID. It seems strange because oftentimes we sit in church next to these people, and we've known them for years. And I'm not suggesting IDs don't have their place, but in an area like this, it seems kind of
that's a whole other discussion.
Redundant,
too.
Yeah.
It is redundant, by the way, because you do a lot to register to vote.
Yeah.
And which includes, your birth certificate and your ID and all those things. And once you're registered, if you're on that polling book, I mean, and it's a felony to lie at a polling place. I mean, felony meaning you go to prison. And so I can't imagine, it's not worth it. Your one vote isn't going to, is not worth it. So, but that's a whole nother.
We'll get into that a little more depth again.
Yeah.
to bring that up this time, maybe that wasn't the best thing since we have other topics
it is
too.
because it's happening right now. Yeah,
okay.
Good. I'm glad you asked.
You mentioned COVID, and knowing being involved, my wife and I do help a little bit with one of the vaccination sites, and I'm getting the impression that the numbers aren't quite as great that are coming in, and nationally they're telling us that too, that they've dropped from say 3.5 million people vaccinated daily to substantially less.
Yeah.
And then we've also heard that we should know soon if there is a vaccine that could be used for people, I think 12 to 16 or something like that. And I don't know where that stands, but touch on that since you're very much involved with encouraging people.
You bet. I'm vaccinated.
I am.
You're vaccinated. Yeah. That's why we're both able to sit here without masks and have a conversation. And we all want to be able to do that again, anywhere, without question, without wondering, is that person next to me vaccinated? Am I going to, or is this place that I'm walking into safe? With that said, we have definitely plucked the low-hanging fruit, right? And it's going to get harder and harder because there's a lot of hesitancy. It goes back to the lies that were told last year, as a matter of fact, regarding this virus, and there always has been some vaccine hesitancy by some people, right? But now it's grown exponentially over this. And what's so hard about wearing a mask, right? So it's a simple thing, and it doesn't have to be a political statement to wear a mask or not to wear a mask, or get a vaccine or not get a vaccine. You look back in history in this country, we have, with great pride, the citizens 100 years ago listened to the health experts and did all they could to fight back a flu that was killing people left and right. When war came, they rationed, rationed their gas, they rationed sugar, they rationed metal, and recycled. I mean, everybody contributed. No questions asked. This was the right thing to do. Now we have a war on a virus, and we shouldn't be so lacking of trust and willingness to do the right thing for each other. And that might be maybe sound a little rough, but that seems to be the case. Some people will think I'm not sick, and I hear this all the time that only 3% of people die, 97% survive, and it's like I don't think anybody is a throwaway just because they get sick from a virus, and we should remember that. And I just had this conversation, by the way, with my dental hygienist this morning, and her family's gone through it with her own father, who had it more than a year ago, and still suffers some issues with his lungs and what else? Blood thinner he's on because of that. So,
well, I've had several discussions with people regarding the polio vaccines, and I was in second grade. They lined us up in a line, and they went down, and everybody got their shot, and they came back a week later or whatever and got the second one, then came back and got the third one. And I may be mistaken, but I think that was not that long after the war ended, the Second World War, and there was perhaps a more concern about the group as a whole, and willing to do what needed to be done, just like they did during the war effort. And I think maybe our culture has changed a little bit since then, which is unfortunate. And I think you're right. There will always be a small group of people that feel they can't trust vaccines, and that's a given. If I were to make a wish today, if I may, I wish when Mr. Trump was president, he had been very open, and he could still do it, and let his supporters know that he and his wife got vaccinated. He had COVID, and that they feel it's important that all citizens seriously
Yeah.
consider
Yeah.
the vaccinations. But again, I hear you saying, seriously consider.
Yeah. And it was, it was an unfortunate situation of an election year, and this is the way he chose to go down this path of trying to make people feel like there's nothing happening, everything's okay, because he didn't want it to be a bad thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But-
and it wasn't. And the thing is that we don't blame him for it,
No.
for the COVID, and we don't blame our presidents for things that they can't control.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be anyway.
Yeah.
So
I remember getting that shot when I was a young kid too for polio, and I'm a little younger than you. I think it was only one shot by the time I had it, but
Yeah.
you even had a permanent mark on your arm from that. Or then I remember a sugar cube too. Was that also for?
that was polio.
Polio.
That's
That was
what
polio.
people tell me. In fact, I think
Yeah.
that happened not too long. I had mine in about, I suppose, 53 or 54, and it wasn't long after that. And the interesting thing that we don't know yet, we talk about we talk about people getting over it, but with polio, people got over it, but had some struggles. Some people had serious struggles afterwards.
Yeah.
And this could happen with COVID. We don't know that yet.
Yeah. I had a cousin who struggled with walking,
Yeah,
and of course we know FDR.
yeah,
Was in a wheelchair. Dude, I think that probably actually helped a lot of people because they see firsthand someone that they really admired and was a leader, and
with his paralysis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Jeff and I are both asking our audience, if you haven't been vaccinated, do consider it seriously, and you have to make the final decision. Obviously, no one is forcing you to do it, but we hope that there will be significant long-term benefit for both the individual receiving it and the group as a whole.
Yeah.
And people who can't take it.
We want our kids to not have to go through this on again, off again, virtual, in person.
Yeah.
I mean, we want to get back to, I personally want to get back to in person. I need to build those relationships with my colleagues down in the Capitol, and for us to get things done. And I think from every aspect of life, we all want more in person again and open things up.
Yeah, yeah. It's very important. Moving on, I think the topic of perhaps the biggest topic in terms of your house in the Senate is the budget. And the governor sent a proposal to the Senate and the Assembly, I assume, to both houses. And in Wisconsin, correct me if I'm mistaken, it's a 2-year budget.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It's a big deal because it affects us in so many ways locally. So the state, for instance, the county, as you know, very well know, is a branch of state government. So the services that are administered and funded by the state are I should say administered by the county, really. Whether it be human services and all sorts of things. And even like our schools as well. The funding formula is dependent on the state doing their portion, and municipalities. It just goes right down the line. So the state budget is so critical. There were hearings held on the governor's budget, which to me to some degree was a bit disingenuous because the budget committee already knew, the majority party already knew they were going to reject the governor's proposal completely, which is what, as we speak here today, on the 7th of May, they did it yesterday. They rejected 390, just without discussion, 391 proposals out of that budget gone in one motion. Then that was motion 19, and then motion 21, I believe, or 22 was was basically whatever else was left was remove it and start from base. Base meaning the budget we had previously. So we have a base budget right now, and then they will do some things to that going forward.
Tweaking some things
until
there.
June, when we'll probably see it in our House and vote on it. They're going to make it easy for me to vote no if this is the way we're going to budget, because at all those hearings, and I sat through the one in Menominee, person after person came forward on their particular issues, pleased with what the governor was proposing. There was $200 million in his proposal for small business. We're trying to rebuild this economy and get this economy rolling again, not even as the way it was, but better, right? There was broadband, $200 million in that budget for broadband, on top of the $200 million he's promised out of the federal funds. So we don't get, during a 2-year period, we haven't spent more than $70 million in a 2-year period for broadband expansion. So get that rolling, which we know is so critically important now. $700 million was for special education. And if anybody understands school budgeting or public school budgeting, they know how special education has fallen on to the local school districts and eaten up so much of the budget. It doesn't give them the flexibility they need to do all the other things they need to do. Those are just examples. But then there's the Medicaid expansion was also in there. And once again, the Republican have decided to totally ignore that, turn that $1.6 billion that we would have leveraged from the federal government if that had passed, turn that away. I don't understand why politics and whatever their pettiness is about that they can't take our tax dollars back to us from federal government. And then marijuana expansion, marijuana legalization was in there. Whatever you think about recreational marijuana, but there was the so-called medical marijuana was a separate one, all gone. 9 out of 10 people surveyed by Pew Institute recently have agreed that some form of marijuana legalization should take place. Marijuana legalization would make it safer. It isn't like this is something new, something anybody has, oh my goodness, it's going to explode. Well, no, this is already out there. But unfortunately, people are using marijuana and not knowing exactly what they're getting if they're buying it from some, I don't know where they get it. But so those things are just gone, just like that. And the last thing I want to make sure to hit on is what seems to be the thinking with the Republicans right now is that they can take that federal ARPA money and backfill our state budget with it. That's their plan. And not only aren't they able to do that because they've already been given memos from our Legislative Fiscal Bureau that would be they would not be able to do that because the federal guidelines for that money is not for backfilling or preserving our state budget. It's for small business. It's for raising wages. It's for all child care. All the things we need to do to lift the economy into the private sector. And somehow they're going to make that argument that they're going to control that federal money coming in and do backfill the state budget and lower your state taxes. It's going to be an election year in 22 for the governor, right? So they're going to tell you they're going to lower your taxes. By doing it this way, so.
Well, this lowering taxes, none of us necessarily want to pay more taxes, but by the same token, in the past it's caught us when when taxes have been lowered, then we have a shortfall, or you cut important programs, and you mentioned. Special education programs and so forth. And I know many families who have had children that it took great advantage of those programs, and they are not there today. The schools don't have the money.
Yeah. You've seen shop eliminated
Yeah.
some places. Some places don't even teach civics anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're really struggling because of that, right? Yeah, it's
Well, and special ed, I don't know how it's defined now, but at the time when my kids were in school, special ed it covered a whole range of things because we all learned differently. And not that people didn't have the capability, but they had to have special help to develop their capability, and that's not inexpensive.
well, here's a little fact for you about special education funding. The state of Wisconsin funds special ed, I think, less than 30% back to the public schools. I think it's around 30% to the public schools. Do you know what they fund special ed to the private schools? 90%. 90%. We have this voucher program in this state. They call it choice, but we have this unequal favoritism towards private versus public among the majority party, and that's ridiculous. This is a side note, but that's just a fact.
Well, I think tying into that, my understanding is there's not much accountability
No.
for that in terms of budgeting or curriculum or whatever. Is there?
No, we struggle with that. So,
Yeah.
so all that said, better days are ahead. We like to keep thinking, right? We are getting ARPA funds. We're going to get at least that $200 million that the governor has already started to figure out where those ARPA funds can be spent, and we can get $200 million of it into broadband expansion. That's huge. But we're going to have this continuous struggle for the next couple months with the Joint Finance Committee and what they will do moving forward and what we end up with a budget. But I guess we're going to have to, continue to argue for better things.
If the listeners here have any position they want to make, let Mr. Jeff Smith know, or Mr. Prunchinsky, who's the Assembly representative. Let them know what you think and the needs of the community as you see them. We're running out again.
Yeah.
And
Never enough time.
thank you for being here today. And we hope we'll get together next month if at all possible.
We will. All
So
right.
summer's on its way.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening. Bye now.